The most successful coaches never stop learning. They are committed to their personal growth and making themselves better. I'm Colby Donovan, and welcome to the Coaching Coaches Podcast. I'll speak with the world's most respected coaches, best-selling authors, and top business leaders to give you insight into their philosophies, lessons, and mindsets for you to apply to your own life. Head on over to coachingcoaches.co, where you can subscribe to this podcast and join some of the top coaches around the country who also enjoy our regular newsletter. My guest today is Bret Burchard, co-founder of the mindset development company ChampionShift and co-author of Catching Confetti, Developing a Mindset of a Champion. For the past 10 seasons, he's worked with the Phoenix Suns in various roles, most recently as the head coach of their G League team. In this episode, we discuss his coaching experience within the Phoenix Suns organization and what piqued his interest to dive headfirst into the mental performance aspect of coaching and player development. He gives some background on his book and the course he started this year, both of which are designed to help coaches improve their mental game. We dig into some of the mindsets he believes some of the top performers have and how you can both develop them yourself and instill them within your players. Please enjoy the episode. So I'd love to hear kind of how you got into coaching and how someone who starts in PR originally at a school decides to make the switch to coaching.
Yeah. Well, coaching was really in my DNA. I think the PR was the aberration of anything. My dad was a college basketball coach growing up. He coached a small college in Missouri for 31 years. Hall of Fame's, name on the court, all the good stuff. Like, I basically grew up in the gym. I was born on the first day of basketball camp. My junior high was across the street from the gym. So after school, I'd walk across the street and, set up my homework at the scorer's table, watch him do practice. And our lives revolved around the basketball season, whether it's road trips or recruiting trips or just games on the weekends. And so I grew up in it and then went to the school in Taylor University in Northeast Indiana, played for another Hall of Fame coach, Paul Patterson, who's has a nice track record of developing coaches, several D1 guys and a lot of small college coaches played for him. So it was in my DNA. My mom tried to talk me out of coaching, so I diverted and went the PR route for a couple of years, but I couldn't get away from it. So I went back to my natural state, I guess you could say.
So first lesson from this will be don't listen to mom.
Which is not advice I'm going to give to anybody.
So I got to ask, Taylor University, I used to love every year seeing it on ESPN, the Silent Night. Were you ever the guy who hit the shot in a game to have everybody go nuts?
Never hit the shot, but I did make the assist. And funny story about that is my mom was listening to it on the radio. And of course, for those who don't know, everyone's silent for the first 10 points. And then we score the 10th point and the place just erupts and it's cacophony. It's absolute bedlam for the rest of the night. And
I'm gonna link the video in the show notes. If you haven't watched, even if you stop listening, please go watch it because it is one of the best traditions in all of sports. In my opinion.
Of the most unique things ever. But to your question, my mom was listening to the game on the radio, and the radio announcer had said my name because I got the ball, and then the next thing you hear is just noise. You can't hear anything else. So she was sure that I had hit the 10th point, and it wasn't. I didn't hit it, so I just made the assist.
And then, so at what point? And correct me if I'm wrong, but you worked in player development. Mm-hmm. You worked in the video department, and then were assistant head coach of the G League team. Correct?
Yeah. So went through PR to the video room, and then worked up to player development, and then went to the G League as an assistant. Got called back to the Suns, behind the bench assistant, and then 2 years as the head coach for the G League team.
So I want to, for those listening, we're going to talk about the book, and we're going to talk about his program, which is basically, and you correct me if I'm wrong, all about the mental side of sports and performance. Yeah. So at what point during that time did you really get interested in that? Was that something you were hearing your dad talk about when you're doing homework? Is that something that you were always interested in, or did you get to a certain point where like, man, this is something that people aren't talking about or thinking about as much?
Sure. Probably the seed was planted in college. My college coach was big on the sports psychology side. So I wasn't heavy into it then, but he would talk a lot about it. I think for me, the scale started to tip when I got into the development role with the Suns, and I started working with players who were, into the rotation or 10-day contracts, or, guys who were trying to make it. And you're looking for every way to help them grow and develop as players and as people. And what I noticed was two things was happening with those guys. One, we would only really get to work, in individual settings. There's not a lot of practice time during the season. And so getting the skills to translate from, the individual one-on-one workout to a game-like setting, these guys would be great shooting in an empty gym. But then, when it comes into a game and you got to make a decision and you got to react to certain situations, how do you apply the skills you've learned or you've developed in real-time situations? And so the brain and like the learning process of that was really fascinating to me. And then the second piece of that was when you get into your moment, like you've got 2 minutes or 3 minutes to perform, the lights are on. How do you make all that hard work pay off in that pressure moment? And I'm watching guys like Steph Curry who are doing impossible things every night. And he seems like he's dropping into mental states or flow states almost on demand. And for me as a development coach and like in an avid learner, I was like, that can't be just a God-given gift. There's got to be something you can develop. And to help the players I was working with, I had to figure out how to develop that in them. And so that's what led me down this path of, exploring the mental side of the game and mindset. And it was kind of an untapped area. We were spending a lot of time in the training room and in the weight room and on the court, but we weren't doing as much with the mental skills. And so it just seemed like an opportunity for me to make an impact.
So I'd love to talk about your book,
Yeah.
Catching Confetti, Developing the Mindset of a Champion. I've told you this, so you've heard it before, but I've listened to it twice now. I think it's a great listen for, frankly, anyone, whether you're someone who's an executive at a company, whether you're someone who's a coach looking to get better yourself, or you're trying to train your players to be better. So what was the genesis to say, you know what, I'm going to put this all together and write a book? Because I don't think many coaches are writing a book unless you're someone who's got a ghostwriter.
Yeah. So another thing that's just kind of been a part of my life is writing. And so that was a natural piece of it for me. But more than anything, having a tangible process that I could deliver to athletes and coaches was really important to me. I was talking about mindset development. I had, adopted this process for basically tapping into flow states that I was trying to communicate to players, to coaches, to anybody who would listen and was interested. And the book gave us a really tangible way, hey, you want to know more? Read this. And it was a great way to spread the message farther into more people, and into applicable ways. I think a lot of the feedback we're getting about the book is just how down to earth applicable it is to everyday life. And so that was the intent behind it.
So one of the things I really picked up on in the book is this idea about identity. And I had this conversation with Fran Fraschilla when I had him on the podcast, that I really respected and admired his ability to step away from coaching and work in television, because he wanted to spend more time with his family and his children while also being around the game in a different way. And so many people, I feel like, get to a certain place in life where it's, I'm a banker. If, God forbid, something happens to my job, I'm going to lose myself and I don't know what's going to happen to me.
Yeah, it's really the foundation of everything we teach with our company ChampionShift, and then our program Catching Confetti. But it's learning how to separate who you are from what you do and who you're in relationship with. I think what happens for most of us is we conflate those things, and what we do becomes the foundation of who we are, or the communities we're in, the teams we're a part of, becomes the foundation of who we are. And when you do that, you setting yourself up for a crisis. So what happens when you have failure in your mission? What happens when you're no longer a part of the team? You get cut, you get fired, whatever reason. Then who are you? Where do you go next? What do you stand on then? And what we found is people who have conflated identity with mission and community, they gotta try everything to make mission succeed so that they can feel whole as a person. Well, in doing that, you're forcing your will onto a situation that may not be most appropriate. You're coaching or leading just from an insecure state that are tearing other people down, or it's just an unhealthy way to go about it. Your community is going to be unhealthy because you're building relationships to seek validation and belonging. So we just flip the order of that and say, what if you had validation, belonging, worth apart from what you do, apart from who you're in relationship with? And then you can engage in those things in like a healthy, clear-minded, I guess, really giving state rather than a taking state.
And so how do you try to, and there's so many ways we could go with this whole episode on either, you doing it with yourself or you doing it with X player on the Phoenix Suns. So how do you as a coach try to, one, remove yourself from saying, like having so much of your self-worth, I guess, tied up in being a successful coach and moving up? And then also too, how do you try to coach up your players over time so they aren't feeling that way? Yeah. And I know those are very loaded questions we could talk for 15 hours about.
Yeah, that's basically the process we take people through in our Catching Confetti deal and a program. And the idea is it starts with recognizing that filter. I think most of us don't understand how identity can be such a big piece of us. We tend to take identity as like one marker, of who we are, rather than I am more than my job title. I'm more than my relationships. I'm more than my, role as a dad or husband or wife, whatever it is. And so being able to reframe our lives through identity, mission, community is a starting point. And then recognizing when we face times where we call it proving and hiding. We're trying to overproject ourselves to protect our ego or protect our identity from being threatened. Or if we just withdraw and hide, we remove ourselves, and we don't express a healthy vulnerability to try to protect ourselves. All that is just clues and signals to where identity, mission, community are too intertangled. From a player's perspective, my approach as a coach is to keep a lot of process-focused language. Like, you're not defined by your results. You're not defined by even growing. Who you are is separate, but I want to keep focused on, are we growing? Not necessarily are you achieving. If you don't achieve, you're a failure, you're a loser as a person. That's not true. If you're growing, every moment is a time to a chance to experience and learn more about who you are. And so focusing that on the process over results is a starting point for me, and incorporating that kind of language and mindset into our program.
And I read your book and listened to it after I read Nick Nurse's book. And I couldn't help but think about the parallels from him talking about his time in, I think it was the D League then. I'm not gonna purposefully get it wrong. I think it was the D League then, but talking about coaching those guys because they are in the kind of the toughest spot out of anyone. And for those who listening, if they don't know, the D League's basically like the baseball minor league. So you've got guys who are busting their ass just to try to get a 10-day contract to get anyone to look at them. So I would feel like when you were coaching with the Suns G League team, I imagine it's the same thing where you got guys who are super insecure or super overly vulnerable and scared to be vulnerable. And I imagine that was like fertile training ground for you as a head coach to work on these ideas.
For sure. Same thing. And if you get too attached to, to the results of what you're doing, like, did I get a call up? Well, then the thing you really got to battle is comparison to other people. All right, they're getting a call up. Why am I not getting a call up? I can beat him. My numbers are better than him. How is he getting it? I'm not. This distracted by comparison. That just moves you off course, and it is a little bit of a sense of, I guess you could call it kind of a wandering phase, where a lot of these guys came from big time D1 programs. They're the star of the program, and now they're in the G League or D League, and no one's at the games watching. They're not on TV, and you're starting to look around and say, okay, who am I now? And it's a good way to, I guess, strip away all the extraneous stuff and figure out who you are at your core, regardless of what happens in basketball.
I would love to hear you talk about the different mindsets you talk about in your book, and the Tyson Fury example you gave is one of my favorite stories I've ever heard.
Yeah.
So if you could tie that in at the end, I'd love that.
Yeah. So the book basically encapsulates the 7 essential mindsets of world-class performance. And so we figured out, what we did is we kind of distilled, if you're going to be an elite performer, what mindset do you need to have? And so if you think about, like, Steph Curry is this ultimate picture of a flow state. All right, what is he able to do in the process of achieving flow state? And so we distilled out these 7 mindsets. It started with the resilient mindset in separating who you are from what you do, and the ability to keep going regardless of external circumstances, which then led into the relaxed mindset, which is also one of my favorites, because it is counterintuitive. And this is what you were talking about with Tyson Fury story. But it's this this relaxed presence. So we're not chilling on the couch, lazy. We're not saying you don't have to work hard, but it's a relaxed presence. The people, like, you've worked with them, you've seen them, who are trying to prove something. They're coming in, they always got an edge, and they're trying to force something into the conversation or into the practice or into the game that's just not there. And it rubs people the wrong way. They come across the wrong way. And so what we try to encourage is a relaxed presence where I got nothing to prove, nothing to hide. I show up, I'm fully present, fully engaged, and I cooperate with what's unfolding. The story we talked about was the Tyson Fury Deontay Wilder fight from when was, I guess, early 2020, and the juxtaposition between the two fighters before the fight was so drastic, where Wilder was like, just appeared uptight, pacing in the locker room, like everything seemed really, really tense, and Fury was like relaxed, smiling, dancing, like you could just tell that, whatever happened, he was going to be able to just roll with the punches, pun intended. And he did. And not to say like he won because of that, but my belief is whether he won or lost, it was the superior mindset. And if he had lost, he would be able to just flip it right to the next obstacle. If you go back and you watch like locker room footage of him from their first fight where it ended in a draw, he was like, it's all right. We'll get him next time. Like, we know we won the fight. We'll get him. Like, he had nothing to prove, nothing to hide. He was rolling with it and cooperating with what was going. And it's the superior mindset for just a better way to live, to relate to your family and friends and coworkers, and then to find optimal performance.
If you enjoy this podcast, I also write a weekly newsletter sharing the best content I found in the last week that directly applies to coaches. Some of the best coaches in the world subscribe, and it's free. So go to coachingcoaches.substack.com or check out the link in the show notes to subscribe. Once again, that's coachingcoaches.substack.com. Let's get back to the episode. We don't need to go through all 7, that's why people can go buy the book or the audio book, but are there 1 or 2 others you think are, I imagine one's not more important than the other, but just that you want to touch on?
Yeah, they all build on each other, and the kind of the perfect cocktail of them, results in what at the end what we call relaxed intensity. The one that a lot of coaches who read the book kind of pick out and lock in on are the visionary mindset when we talk about goal setting, and shifting this idea of achievement goals to being goals. I tell the story of my freshman year of college basketball when we all had a coach had us all get together as a team and write out our goals, and all our goals were like everyone else's, right? It was make it to the national tournament, win a conference championship, same top 5 in defense. All this. We had one goal that was we want to be undefeated at home. And he said to us, he said, what happens if we lose our first home game? Then what? We're going to cancel the rest of the season? We're going to forfeit? Now what do we do? And it just got in my brain like that goals are really brittle and fragile, and to have goals that can endure all circumstances, or that can push you forward to who you're becoming, was more important. And so setting goals about who you want to become over what you want to achieve. You can set achievement goals, and we can find a way to get there. We can cheat, we can lie, we can steal to reach the goal. But who will we become in the process? So instead, let's write goals that are focused on who we want to become. All right, I want to be a head coach. Well, I can go find a league and make my own league or start my own team and be the head coach, right? Or I want to be the kind of leader, that it takes to be in charge of an organization. I want to be the kind of strategist that can rise to that level of responsibility. I want to be the leading scorer on the team. Well, every team has a leading scorer. How about I want to have the skills or the mindset to be able to handle the responsibility of carrying the scoring load for our team? It's a different way to approach it. And so I think focusing on who you become in the process is a lot more valuable.
So is this your talking about goals from a mindset perspective with them, or is this also like, make X amount of shots this offseason from the left corner 3, or is it all the above?
Yeah, so we can set goals as like markers of progress, in a certain direction. Like, I'm not abolishing all achievement oriented goals together. I think the important thing is the mindset behind it. So the guy says, all right, I want to have the G League player. I want to have the goal to make it to the NBA. Well, there's so many factors that go into you getting a call up that are completely out of your control. And so that could set you up for a really frustrating goal.
I was going to say, it almost sounds like that could contribute horribly to that idea of not having your identity tied to your self-worth.
Yeah.
To me, it's like, if you do that, you're just toast.
Yeah. And so let's focus on, okay, what are the qualities that make up an elite performer at an NBA level, or that scouts are looking for, to say, yeah, we talk to our guys a lot about, scouts are coming in with a hundred names that they got to evaluate. They're looking for reasons to say no. They're looking for reasons to cross you off the list. So let's don't give them any reason to cross you off the list. And let's start focusing on, eliminating those things that would cross you off the list, and then developing the skills, the personality traits, the intelligence, basketball IQ, the relationships, all those pieces that would give you a chance to make it to the NBA. And then, even if you don't make it to the NBA, imagine who you're going to be at the end of that process. Like, who you're going to become is you're going to be proud of that, and it's going to set you up for great success wherever you're going to go next.
Yeah, I was going to say you're going to be a better spouse, you're going to be a better parent, everything.
Exactly.
Employee, whatever it is.
Yeah.
Is there a way, I don't know how involved you were in the process of evaluating, obviously you're seeing the guys in the G League, but in the evaluation process of players, I know I'm thinking more of a scout or a college coach who's scouting high schoolers, which is even harder. But
Yeah.
Are there actions you look for in a player to see that they kind of are beyond the basics of what you would expect kind of in this realm? Or are there questions you can ask to kind of try to tease out where a player is in what you're talking about?
Yeah. The thing I look for the most is go back to this idea of proving and hiding, like finding those insecurities. What are they protecting from, or what are they like over projecting themselves, to protect a core fear or core insecurity. And the ones who have a lot, look, we all do it at some level. The ones who have a heavy dose of that, it's like, okay, there's a lot of insecurity for that person to work through. And then recognizing, like, how do they handle failure? How do they interpret that? Is it through a growth mindset of, all right, this is an experience for me to learn from? Or is it from, I got to protect myself. I'm going to blame others and, blame other circumstances that I'm not going to own the failure or the mistakes as part of my growth. I think those two things are really big, because I do believe mindset, you can develop it. It's not a thing that you have or don't have, but do you have the mindset to develop yourself? Or are you just too protective and too insecure to open yourself up and be vulnerable to improving and recognizing areas you can get better in? And so those are the things I look for the most, just when kind of evaluating people.
And another thing I'd love to hear you talk about from your time with the Suns was helping players kind of navigate themselves through their fears of life. And as I said before, I imagine that's somewhere where you've got guys that are like, maybe you played at Duke or UNC, but now you're in the G League and you may not make it, and you've been praised your whole life. And I'm sure there are guys that are terrified of that. So how do you kind of get guys to go from being that overconfident that you talk about to being a little more humble and vulnerable and open and honest about it, addressing those and admitting that?
Yeah, it comes back to that idea of, like, your identity is not tied up into the results. If you can see that who you are, not defined by what you do, by who you're in relationship with, then you will naturally, like, you'll adopt the humility necessary to make changes and to grow. And the ones who are too wrapped up in having success or winning or not being seen as less than, those guys are the ones who are too protective of their identity. And those are the ones that aren't going to really make a lot of progress. And so that's the process for me is separating that out, who you are. And you do that throughout your coaching, like I said, more process language. But then as you're giving feedback and stuff, affirming personhood first, and then addressing performance. Like, you're awesome. I'm happy you're on the team. We're better because you're here. You have great potential. Here's some things we can improve on to make it even better. But addressing performance or personhood before you address performance.
Can you give an example of what you mean by process-driven language?
Yeah. So if you go into here's a great example I like to use. If I walk into a gym and someone says, "Hey, there's Brett, the best shooter in the gym." Well, I've been given this label that now I have to protect. I might feel I have to protect. If I don't internally reject that label, well, now I'm not going to compete against anybody who might show that I'm not the best shooter in the gym. I'm going to cheat in all the competitions to make sure I win, or else I'm not going to be seen as the best player. Instead, if I walked in the gym and said, "Hey, there's Bret. He's the hardest worker in the gym." Well, now we're talking about process, right? Here's the one that can regain focus even if you get him distracted, right? Now you're talking about a process. And that's something I can live up to. And if I stick to that process, I will become one of the better shooters. I will become one of the better players. And so Carol Dweck talks a lot about it in her book Mindset, which talked about growth and fixed mindset. But it's encouraging that growth mindset over and over in all the language you use.
You talked about comparison before, and that just being a very unhealthy thing. How do you, I mean, on every team, everyone's going to compare themselves to other. I play more than Johnny. Johnny plays more than less than Sally. How do you try to encourage, and this is something that I admire Pete Carroll at talking about, competition within his team, that you can just be super competitive within an organization, but not be unhealthy where you're comparing yourself to your peers. So how do you try to get guys to be super competitive without focusing too much on comparison within each other? Because I feel like it's human tendency for all of us to compare ourselves to each other.
For sure, absolutely. Comparison is a status game, right? And it's a zero-sum game. Someone's going to win, someone's going to lose. And here's the nature of comparison: you always lose it. Like, you're always comparing yourself. Most of the time we compare ourselves with people who are doing stuff that we think we should be doing. And so we're losing. But even if we compare ourselves to someone who's not as good as us or not achieving the same things we're doing, well, we're still losing because it's the wrong game to be playing. Like, all we're doing is trying to set ourselves up on the status level. Competition is a game we can all win, because competition presents an obstacle to help you sharpen your skills. And so even if I lose in quotes on the scoreboard, I've gotten better because I engaged in the competition. And so encouraging that the competition is what makes you better. And again, it's with your language, and it's just constant reinforcement that you're not playing a status game. It's about everything. Every moment is a chance to improve, to learn about yourself, to try to get better at something. And so reinforcing that the competition is good. And when you make it about comparison, I'm better than you, that's when it gets unhealthy.
Is there an example from your time, and I'm sure there's tons, but of you kind of applying these principles, and we can keep the player nameless, but applying these principles and ideas to working with a guy where there was a pretty positive outcome on the other side?
Yeah, I think my first year in the G League, the one that comes to mind really clearly, Ty Ellis was our head coach with the Northern Arizona Suns, and we had a trio of point guards on that team. And they would go at each other in practice. And it was great for them. Like, and we had to constantly remind them, like, iron sharpens iron, right? This competition is what's going to make you better. And 2 out of those 3 guys are in the league. And so having that environment will make you better if you embrace it. Now, what can get in the way is if it starts fracturing the team, where you're getting jealousy and envious and that kind of stuff. But the more you can emphasize it to them that the competition is going to make you better, it does.
So can you kind of talk to me about the course and that you offer and how it's structured, the time commitment, and kind of who's kind of been most receptive to it so far?
Yeah. So Catching Confetti is a course. So we got the book, and it's also available in a course setting. So It's designed over 8 sessions, where we walk through the 7 mindsets that are laid out in the book. There's videos, it's all online. So videos and audios to teach through the mindsets. And then within each mindset, we have exercises to develop them in yourself. They're all resistance-based exercises. So ideally, you're going through it like as you're going through your season in stressful situations, and it helps you kind of navigate those things and upgrade your mindset as you're experiencing it. And then what we also do within the program is I'll come along and coach you and help you apply what you're learning, accelerate what you're learning, customize it to unique situations. But it's 8 sessions. Usually we do it over 8 weeks. Sometimes we stretch it out over 4 months, but an 8 session deal to develop those mindsets in yourself.
And I'll say for those listening too, the book is, I did the audio book. If you're a coach and you're traveling, it's kind of the perfect length. I want to say it was like 3-ish hours, 2.5 hours. So great for a road trip, great for flying somewhere. Perfect timing for that.
Or if you just want to hear me read you a bedtime story.
There you go. So is there another coach? I imagine you were around a lot of people with the Suns. Is there a coach or executive you work with who you feel like did a really good job of either embracing these ideas in their own life or teaching the players well?
That's a really good question. I think that this is a next big step for the NBA and NBA programs. There are teams that do it really well as far as like mental skills training, mindset training. And there are coaches who do it naturally. Now, a laid out process like we've done with catching confetti, I don't think a lot of people are doing that within their programs. But I think you look at Major League Baseball, where there's such an infrastructure for mental skills performance. And it's true in other sports, especially in the Olympic sports. And I think this is the next frontier for the NBA.
Do most NBA teams have a sports psychologist on staff?
Yeah, now just as awareness of mental health and that stuff has increased, it's actually required by the league that every franchise has, a mental health professional on staff. I think the thing let me first say that's all awesome, like super helpful for the athletes that need that. I think there's also a segment of athletes who aren't necessarily dealing with like mental health issues in the sense of chemical imbalances or just that kind of functioning help, but who just need to upgrade a mindset, like just take a good performing mindset into a high performing mindset. And so that's where we try to tackle with ChampionShift. It's not necessarily a clinical mental health thing, but just coaching. People who are operating at a standard baseline or a high performing baseline, take them to elite levels.
It almost seems like, I work in finance, and a lot of investing teams will have or large pools of money will have an outsourced chief investment officer. And almost sounds like, your program could almost be that for I'm in Orlando. I can't imagine Stetson has a full-time, sports psychologist, performance coach on staff, but it almost seems like could be that for those kind of programs.
For sure. And we've set the program up that way, where we'll do cohort training like in the middle of the season. And so maybe you don't have a mindset coach on staff or your budgets don't allow that, but you can go through the program as you're going through the season. I meet with you once a week or once every 2 weeks and, help you navigate the season as you're going while we're applying these exercises and developing these mindsets. It's really where we've seen a lot of success with it.
So 2020 has been an absolute shit show. We're just about done with it. I know a lot of people have been laid off. A lot of people are stuck at home. A lot of people, the government's decided they can't work.
Yeah.
I really admire what you've done this year, and you could have been hanging out and doing whatever at home while everything was on pause. And meanwhile, here we are and sitting in December, and you've come out with a online program and a book, and you're a coach who did it yourself. Like I said, no ghostwriter. So there's a guy who talks about, his name's Patrick O'Shaughnessy. He's the chief investment officer of a couple $1 billion asset management firm, and he talks about this is who you're up against, and he's talking about it with investors in the stock market. But I think it's good for other people listening to think this is a guy who's coaching at a high level, and this is what he's doing in 2020. And I just think it's a great lesson for people. It's awesome.
I appreciate you saying that. And, definitely encourage that, not in a shaming way of like, if you're not writing books in your off season,
yeah.
But like so a lot of people were able to take the time and finally spend time with family, which is just as healthy. I think for me, it's about obstacles and opportunities. This thing was brewing in me for a while. And when everything got shut down with no end in sight back in March 2020, it was like, hey, here's an opportunity. And so let's seize it. Now's the moment. And so, I appreciate you saying that. Definitely. Thank you. It's been a fun summer through 2020 in the fact that being able to get the book out and get the course out and help people in another way. So definitely very rewarding.
So last question before we get to the end of episode questions. You talked about being on the court, growing up around your dad.
Yeah.
Is your dad, are these ideas that he kind of used in coaching? Has he come around on them? If not, how has that been?
Funny story. So my dad read the book, and he's retired now. He lives in Southern Missouri, out in the woods, and he's actually on the Lake of the Ozarks. And he read the book, and then the next weekend he went on ATV rides with his friends, and they took him on these like the Black Diamond trails, and he's new to the ATV riding. And he said, all I could think about was chapter 3 of your book. I had to lean into where I was afraid. I had to lean in. I was like, it was like, for your dad to say that and like accept your work and then apply it. It was like one of the coolest wins of the whole process for me.
Yeah, I can imagine that's better than getting every single D1 college team to sign up for the course itself.
It was awesome.
Well, so we're going to link everything in the show notes. We're going to link the book. We're going to link your contact info. We're going to link the course. But do you want to say where people can go if they want to learn more?
Yeah. About the book and course, catchingconfetti.thebook.com has everything there. And then our company is ChampionShift.com, and we're doing a lot of putting out new content, and that's the best place to stay connected with everything we're doing with mindset development.
All right, so some end of episode questions we ask all our guests. What's one book you think every coach should read besides your own?
Dang it. I say that my two favorite books on my shelf are The Art of Learning and The Rise of Superman, which kind of gets geeked out science-y on the mind and flow states. But that was the one that had me doing cannonballs in the pool when I was first discovering all this.
Who's one person you'd want to hear as a guest on this podcast?
I think a great guest for coaches to listen to just about leadership and casting vision is a guy named Chris McAllister, who I've done a lot of work with the identity formation and with business leaders and stuff. But he has great insights on leadership and casting vision.
Love it. What's one area you're looking to improve in over the next year?
Yeah, for me, it's casting vision and then articulating that vision consistently and specifically with the players. We as coaches sit around and think a lot, and we brainstorm ideas and we come up with new game plans and new ideas, and we could sit on it and chew on it for like 6 months and convince ourselves it's the best the best thing to do. And then we go and deliver it to the players in one day and expect them to buy in 100% and then get frustrated when they don't. Well, we had just spent 6 months convincing ourselves. Like, we need to spend 6 months convincing them. And so being able to do that where, you get a vision for where you want to go or how you want to do things, but then consistently applying it and communicating it and executing on that vision is where I want to get better at.
What's popular advice you hear people say you think is wrong?
You got to play with a chip on your shoulder.
And why?
The chip on your shoulder will get you far, but it won't get you as far as you're capable. It wears you out and it wears others out along the way. You got to play with a relaxed mindset.
What advice do you have for young coaches who are listening to this?
Be more concerned with who you're becoming than what you achieve. Life is more about experiencing and learning than accomplishing and achieving.
And last question for you. What's the darkest moment you experienced professionally and how did you overcome it?
It feels dramatic to say the darkest moment professionally, but I think, all suffering reveals the center of your identity. And so, for me, especially my second year as head coach of the G League, we weren't getting the results that I was hoping for. And it made for a really challenging season for me. And what it revealed to me was that in everything that I preach, the center of my identity was still around getting results to validate me as a good coach. And so that really forced me to step back, reevaluate, and resurface, where do I place my identity? And so that happened just recently. So still learning and growing from that.
And was that did you kind of have a moment or a spark where that kind of hit your mind, or was that kind of a gradual kind of learning that you had?
Yeah, it kept popping up throughout the season, and I had to recenter on the fly as we went. And when the season ended and like all the pressure stopped for a second, it helped me really pick up the pieces and see what was left and what was whole that I could really hold on to.
Well, I appreciate you joining me today. I appreciate you talking about this. I highly suggest everyone go out and get the book, and excited to see what comes next for you and the company.
Awesome. Thanks, Colby. Appreciate it.
You've been listening to the Coaching Coaches Podcast. Be sure to subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast platform and receive our world-class newsletter in your inbox every Sunday. You can access both of those at coachingcoaches.co. Once again, that's coachingcoaches.co.